All right, everyone, welcome back to the Self-Leadership Lab. Today, I don't know really where this conversation is going to go. Just met this gentleman that I'm going to bring on, but I know we're going to talk about Stoicism. And for those of you who know me, know that I'm really been diving into it as of late. And I see it as a path to self-leadership because Stoicism talks a lot about control, more importantly, what you can't control, and focusing on the things that matter, which is what self-leadership's all about. So today I'm going to welcome Erick Cloward onto the show. So Erick, welcome to the Self-Leadership Lab. Give everyone a brief introduction and we'll get into the conversation.
All right. I'm glad to be here. So my name is Erick Cloward, and I'm the host of the Stoic Coffee Break podcast. I'm also the author of Stoicism 101, which came out a year ago and has been doing pretty well. And I've had a number of people, comment on my podcast. Hey, I found this at Five Below or different stores that I've never heard of before. And they're like, so, and then I found that you had a podcast. And so here we are. Um, also with that, I'm a leadership and executive coach. I work with generally software development managers is kind of my focus just as in the professional side, just because that's what I did for a number of years. I was in tech for 25 years and as a developer as well as a CTO. I also speak about using stoicism in companies and also about mental toughness. And yeah, so I've kind of my background on stoicism. I didn't know that stoicism was even a philosophy until about 10 years ago. And even though I'd taken philosophy 101 in college, and I'm sure they probably mentioned the Stoics in there, but it just didn't really click. I remember we did discuss Socrates. And what happened was I was listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he mentioned a book by William B. Irvine called Guide to the Good Life, The Art of Stoic Joy. And he said, this is a book that changed my life. And if you know Tim, he reads hundreds of books a year. And so when he singles one out and it's just like, hey, this is, this book absolutely changed it. Um, Obviously, my ears perked up. But what really caught me was the end of it, where it said the art of stoic joy, and I was like, stoic joy. I mean, like to me, I only knew the traditional, term that we have in English of stoic, meaning somebody who's unemotional. I thought that doesn't sound very joyful to me. So I was interested in the idea of that paradox that seemed to be there. So I ordered the book, I read it, got a few things out of it, and then was still listening to Tim's podcast. And then about maybe a year later, he mentioned it again, was all excited about something. I think he was having some, he was taking some of Seneca's works and having them turned into an audiobook by somebody or something like that. And I thought, you know what? I didn't really get as much out of that as I thought I should have. So let me give that another go. So I got the audiobook and I would listen to it to and from work every day. So it was about a 20-minute ride. And I had so many light bulb moments just listening to it. Like I pull up in my driveway and I just sit there, oh, I got to finish this. I got to finish this little chapter part because that's really good. And it just like things just kept popping for me and it was making a lot of sense. And from there, like a lot of people, I picked up one or two of Ryan Holiday's books. I picked up the Stoic Journal, which we were talking about earlier, and it just really started changing the way that I saw things because I used to be much more reactive about things. So I grew up in a very chaotic home. So my dad was 70% of the time things were fine and chill, and then every now and then he would just explode and we'd have no idea what was really going on. And it felt very chaotic all the time growing up because things would be fine and just suddenly that thing out of the blue, he explodes, he's angry. When we were little, we used to get beat. As we got older, obviously, he didn't anymore, but still the emotional, I guess you could call it violence at that point. And so having grown up in that, it I was very reactive to a lot of things. And I found that Stoicism, as I looked at it, it was a very rational way to look at things in a way that I never looked at them. I'd done therapy, I'd done all of these things, but Stoicism was the first time where I saw a framework that said, this is why you think the way that you think. And here are some tools that you can actually do to actually change those things. And because it started making such an impact in my life, in 2018, I had a New Year's resolution of starting a podcast. I tried to make one before. It was all about movie soundtracks because I love music. I'm a musician as well. And they weren't very good. And so I was like, okay, this year I'm going to start it. And even if it sucks, I'm going to try it. It's going to be my practice podcast so that when I start my real podcast, then I'll know what to do. So I just started recording on my iPhone. And uh, my partner at the time made me make a promise that if I started it, I had to do at least 100 episodes because I had a tendency to get excited about something and then just quit. And that was something where she was like, I want you to do this. So you got to do 100 episodes. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I started on January 4th, 2018. And they were short episodes. They weren't very good, but I did it for 137 days in a row. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is exhausting. This is taking up a lot of time. As they got more and more complicated, I was writing down notes, whereas like the first probably 10 episodes for me just had an idea and it was just kind of rambling on. And then, yeah, over time, it just started to take off. I remember I looked at it one day after I had about maybe 5 or 10 episodes and there were 43 people who listened. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. And then I got 100. And then pretty soon I was at 500 and then 5,000 and then 10,000. I was just like, oh, this is turning into a thing. And I started off with the podcast name of Stoic Meditations, but Massimo Pagulio has a podcast called that. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to compete with a Stoic professor. So I looked around for some domain names that I thought might be interesting to get some ideas for podcast episodes. And I stumbled on stoic.coffee and I thought, that's a fantastic name for a website. And I was like, my episodes are short, so why don't I call it Stoic Coffee Break? And yeah, so I turned it into a weekly podcast and took some breaks at certain points when I was struggling with some personal things in my life. And yeah, just kind of took off from there. And I've been doing it ever since.
You know, all those things you brought up, and that's a lot to unpack. So thank you for the background on where you are today and how you got there. One of the things that resonated with me initially was, you talked about the anger issues that you saw as a child. And, like I said, this is our first conversation ever. You don't know, but 6 years ago, I started my journey to becoming a better person because my wife told me I was the angriest person she knew. Like I was suffering with depression and anxiety and all these things. And I realized after time, that was the kindest thing she's probably ever said to me because it set me on a path. And I realized that I too was the angriest person that I knew as well. And it took me a while to get to Stoicism. I didn't hear it from Tim Ferriss, although I've taken a lot of other things from him over the years, but not that. A guy I was in a course with was talking about who knows what, something business related. But he said, hey, I've written a couple books on Stoicism. So I picked one up. It's called The Stoic Edge by Ken Davenport. I don't know if you've read that one before or not, but if not, I highly recommend it, as everyone knows on the show. And it was my introduction to it, right? I never had thought about it, never had heard of it. Sure, I've heard of, the Aurelius and some of those people before, but I never looked at it. And it really like showed me that, hey, the control isn't the depression. The control isn't the anger. The control is what I'm doing with those things. And that's what I saw the beauty in Stoicism, because I guess and I told you starting the show, I'm a baby stoic. I don't know if that's a term or not. We'll call that. Maybe that's another podcast title, The Baby Stoic or something. But it's what you do with what you've got and what you can control. And when you look at it, and you hear people say this all the time, you can't control much. Well, I say you can control even less than that. And it boils down to you control your actions and what you think about. So why not make those what you want? And this isn't a Stoic related, but I read this quote this morning by a guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but he said, real wisdom is not the knowledge of everything, but the knowledge of which things in life are necessary. And that boils down to me what my Stoic practice has become. It's like, what knowledge and wisdom am I seeking and what is necessary? And I tell you what's not necessary: worrying about tomorrow, worrying about 10 years from now, worrying about, things that other people are doing, like what you're doing in Oregon versus what I'm doing in Virginia. And I see this around our culture today, that so many people have outsourced what they worry about, or they've redefined wisdom. Kind of like what you said earlier, the word stoic typically means someone who's reserved, strict, whatever. But at the same time, we've done the same thing with our being, and we've outsourced it. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, whether you agree or disagree. Feel free to disagree with me. I don't care, because this is where real education begins. But did you find Stoicism brought you back to what was, what was needed for you, what knowledge and wisdom you needed, and then also brought you back more to who you are as a person?
Oh, absolutely. I think you nailed it on the head. I think there's kind of a cascading effect in a lot of these things. And part of that is that we are so helpless in so many ways, and we feel so powerless in our lives, but we want to have some semblance of control. But we think that we have control over other things that we don't. And I think that's probably the bane of social media, is that everybody wants to spout their opinion as if it truly matters. And, in the grand scheme of things, your opinion doesn't mean squat. You can think whatever you want, and that's fine. And so, um, but we think that us expressing our opinion on something will actually move the needle on things. And maybe it can, maybe it can't, but usually it doesn't, because, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and so I think that that's why we see a lot of the frustration and anger, on social media, is because people are feeling powerless and helpless. And so, um, in a way, it's kind of lashing out. And And rather than taking that time to go, why am I so upset about things? Why am I so angry about things? What can I do? What's actually in my control to change these things, rather than blaming other people, being mad at, people who you know, have no impact on your life whatsoever. I mean, who cares what some celebrity is doing over here, or what something some celebrity said? It's just like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any material impact on your life at all. But the work that it takes to sit down and first understand what you're really upset about, and second, to actually do something about it, that's a lot of work. And it's oftentimes, something that's kind of scary, because you really have to do a lot of introspection of, okay, why am I so upset about this thing? Why do I feel helpless? Why am I angry about life? And really getting to the point where you understand that anger is incredibly important. And as a good example, I figured out where a lot of my anger came from was that, because I grew up in Salt Lake City, I grew up Mormon, there's this whole social behavior that you're supposed to have because you're part of the church. And so you conform to fit in this very particular way, even if you don't really believe it, even if it goes against your own personal values. It's very much, what did the brethren, what did the leaders say? You're supposed to do that, whatever that is. Obedience was more important than living to your own true values. And so you're constantly spending the time worrying about what other people think of you. And so for me, that was where I got my validation, was, uh-oh, I had to be okay. Other people have to be okay with me for me to feel okay with me. Because, if I'm out of the church, and we all feel this, that's social pressure. But it's kind of taken to a heightened extreme, because, you're supposed to have this whole image of what you look like. Plus, dealing with the anger around my dad, we were always constantly on eggshells about curbing our behavior and acting in a way so that he didn't get upset, because that was a way to stay safe. And so I grew up with this need for other people to like me and for me to get my validation from that. And so when, in my two main relationships that I've had in my life, I was married for 7.5 years, and I was in a long-term relationship for almost 10. The biggest problem was that if they were upset, annoyed, frustrated with me, then I didn't feel okay with me. And so rather than being able to go, okay, I see that you're upset about this, something's bothering you, let's talk about it, I would get defensive and be like, why are you mad at me? You shouldn't be mad at me, because that was scarier, because that was unsafe. And so there was a point where I sat down and I was like, okay, why why is this happening? Why is this such a big deal to me? Why does that get me so worked up? And that's when I finally broke it down. I did a lot of journaling on this and I figured out, okay, I'm really worried about what other people think of me. And I'm like, I need that validation to feel okay with me. Okay, why? Then I took that, the kind of the five whys thing, I took that a little bit deeper and I was like, because I don't feel okay with me. Okay, why don't I feel okay with me? Because I don't think I'm a very good person. And I was like, okay, but why am I not a very good person? And digging down to that, I was like, I honestly don't know why I think I'm not a very good person. So I sat down and wrote a list of everything I didn't like about myself so that I knew the things that I thought weren't good about me. And when I got done with that list, there wasn't anything on there that was really all that bad. It was like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, your friends struggle with these things. And so I just looked at the list and I just went down each line item and I went, can I accept that about myself? Because either it's true or it's something that I believe is true. So it's true to me. And after doing that exercise, it really made it just a deep shift inside of me that still took years to work through some of those things. But that was kind of where I think of it like if you've ever been on a canoe on a lake, you only have to turn the canoe a few degrees and you'll end up in a very different spot when you get to the other side of the shore. And that was basically what happened. I was heading this way, and then I just turned it a few degrees that way. And then over time, because I shifted that, I learned to accept myself. I learned to be okay with myself. I don't have to love or even like everything about myself, but I have to accept it because it's either true, like I said, or I believed it was true. And that self acceptance helped me to break that need for the validation from other people. I still take input from other people, but I can look at it as data and look at it as, okay, that's their opinion about this thing. And I can be thoughtful about it without that big emotional reaction because I feel okay with me. And so anything they say it's just information. If I upset somebody, I can look at it and go, okay, I can see this upset you. Let's sit down and talk about it because it didn't feel like a personal attack anymore. And Stoicism was the thing that really helped me to understand, okay, it's your thinking around things that is causing your emotional reaction. So what are you thinking? Let's get down to your thoughts around this. What's the story you're telling yourself every time you get upset? And that one practice made such a huge difference in my life. And so with my coaching clients, that's one of the things I do with them. And even with some of my friends who are struggling with things, they come to me, they're like, I'm really struggling. And when I do that exercise with people, usually the first reaction is like almost terror in a way of like, wait, you want me to sit down and write all the things that I think are crappy about me? Oh my God, I don't want to do that. It's something that's scary, but it's like, but until you know those things, you can't change those things. And until you accept those things, you're always going to hate them and they're just going to sit in the background. So just look at them because it's just facing reality. It's just either, like I said, either it's true or you believe it's true. So it's real for you. And that right there was, for me, a huge thing. It helped me get over a lot of that anger. But if I hadn't had the tools to be able to separate what are the facts of the situation, what are my opinions of the situation, what are my emotions of the situation, then I probably wouldn't have been able to do that and would still been stuck in that maelstrom of emotion all the time. Feel an emotion, have a reaction. And putting
Yeah.
that pause in the middle was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I took a different path than you, but the same thing. I mean, I walked around not liking myself for a long time. And you know what? It's because I ended up not knowing myself, or I found that I didn't know myself. Because, like you said, all these little things we play in our head every single day, when you wrote them on a paper and you gave them to your friend, they didn't see you that way. But yet you thought they saw you that way. But I have no idea what you're thinking right now. You have no idea what I'm thinking right now. So why not control the one thing? And again, there's no harm. You probably weren't causing harm intentionally. You didn't have intent to hurt anyone. And so in that way you were ended up just hurting yourself because the way you were interacting with the world. And I think if you do this long enough, you lose who you are, right? Because you're acting all the time or you're always on guard, like you said, with your father in these relationships and you're walking on eggshells. You then start, forgetting who you are and you lose that sense. So it's kind of cool that you took Stoicism because I kind of came to this realization before I found Stoicism. But at the same time, now that I look back on it, I look at the way I react to things today when new information comes or bad things come my way, which they always will. But I find that the recovery from them and my response to them is so much, I guess, more enlightened or more in keeping with who I am versus showing that emotion and acting on that emotion and then feeling guilty about everything that I just did. Did you find something similar in your path to healing as well?
Yeah, because for me, it was that exact same cycle. I would blow up about something and turn it to a huge fight, and then wouldn't talk for hours or a day or two, and then feel guilty about it, come back and apologize, say I wouldn't do it again, and then cycle repeats. And this was a way for me to help break that cycle. And, a big portion of it is, like we talked about before, um, understanding what it is you can control and what you can't control. And, the Stoics are really clear on this, so that really the only things you can control are the way that you think about things, the choices you make, the actions you take. And that's really it. You can control what you go towards, what you avoid, but, anything where you have a direct choice, those are the only things under your control. And so separating out all of the things you have no control over, the economy, the weather, what other people think of you, so your reputation. I mean, that's a really huge one. And people, when Epictetus even says that, he's like, you can't control your reputation. People are like, oh no, I can control my reputation. I can do good things. I can do this. It's like, no, you can't, because your reputation is what other people think of you. You can do the right thing. You can do it perfectly, and people will still hate you. People will still choose not to like you because they disagree with your opinion, or they disagree with the action. So you can only act in a way that you think is virtuous. And if other people think it's virtuous, great. If they don't, it doesn't really matter. And so that's also incredibly freeing, because you do the right thing no matter what, regardless of what other people think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that sounds,
But
and for some people, they think that sounds callous, but it's like, no, because you're doing it from a place of virtue. You're practicing wisdom, you're practicing courage, you're practicing justice, which means fairness to everybody involved. And you're practicing temperance, which means balance and moderation, not given to excess. And if you follow those things and you make a choice based on those four principles, the chances are you're going to make a good choice, even if people disagree with you, even if people hate you for making that choice. As long as you feel it is the right choice, honestly, truly the right choice, you should do it. And if it turns out to be wrong later on, then you should be willing to stand up, own it, and say, I was wrong. Now let me make a better choice. And that's really what it
yeah,
comes down to.
yeah. Yeah, that whole working for the appraisal and approval of others. I wrote a whole book on that called The Easy Hard versus Hard Hard. And it's more about the work that you choose to do, because I found myself I was always working for your expectations or the expectations of my peers. And it just let me feel empty every single night. But then when I started working on the work that actually matters to me, which is my own well-being, I mean, let's face it, you're walking around with your own thoughts 24 hours a day. Even when you're sleeping, you're subconsciously processing it. So why not fill that with positive things and things that you're wanting to do? And again, it's not at the expense of others, because a lot of people take this to the extreme. Well, oh, you're selfish, or oh, you're this. No, if I am the best body I can be right now, I can show up for you, Eric. I can show up for you, the listener. And until you start realizing that and all the strain and anxiety in the world, just today, someone called me and was talking about some world event that he thought I needed to know about or that I did know about. And I just had to say, look, I have no idea what you're talking about. And when he told me about it, it was nothing in our region, nothing that impacted us, our well-being right now or our safety right now. But he's like, I can't believe you're not thinking about this. I've been thinking about it nonstop all week or all weekend. And I'm just like, man, that is like, I had a guy on the podcast a few weeks ago talk about living in a prison without bars, talking about how like our physical health are. But I was like, wow, you have imprisoned yourself to a thought that, one, you probably know very little about. Some talking head on the news said something, or maybe it's fact, maybe it's not, who knows? But you've been worried about this for days. It's like, man, think of what you could have done to better your enjoyment, or just go outside and look at birds or nature or whatever you're going to do. I think pretty much anything you could be doing would be better than that. Now, who's that for me to say? I mean, that's for me, but I had to take all those things out because to replace the way I felt about myself, I replaced it with outside events and started worrying about things more and more. So I think this is like a snowball effect, what you're saying. And that's why I think it's so important for leaders in general and anyone, even if you're just leading yourself or, your family, whatever you're doing, to really take stock of what you're thinking because your mind controls everything you do and the way you show up to both yourself, of course, but others, and it's really invaluable. So where did you like if you knew all that you knew today after this 10 years of study and reflection, like how would you treat the relationship you had as a child differently? Have you ever thought about that or how you would act in that situation today?
I mean, it's hard because your parent is, when you're a child, is basically God. They are the person who has power over you. And I think if I had been able to understand these things, I mean, they're kind of complex, so it's hard as a child to do that. Um, I think what I could have done is seen that my father was truly suffering, that he was in a lot of internal mental anguish because of some personal things that I didn't find out about until I was in my 20s. Um, but he was in a lot of anguish and a lot of self-loathing and a lot of self-hate. And so his lashing out had nothing to do with me. But I didn't know that. I thought I was, oh my gosh, I'm a bad kid. I accidentally, closed the door a little too loud when I came home today. Um, and so I think I could have been able to at least disconnect from that a little bit. And as I've gotten older, I've grown to understand my father a lot more. He died when I was 24. Um, but I have a lot more compassion for him, and I was able to forgive him. Not for him, and I didn't approve of what he did, but because I understand it and I can have compassion and see the suffering that he went through. And I forgave him because it didn't help me to hold on to any of that hate and anger.
Mm.
I just looked at him as he was a broken soul, and I wish that he would have been able to find some peace in his life. But, that's neither here nor there. And so, if there is something after this afterlife and I get to see him again, I'll let him know. Hey, I wish you could have just been who you were supposed to be, rather than hiding in this whole persona of what you thought you were supposed to be, which made you a miserable person. And I think this comes back to something I want to circle back on something you said a little bit ago, is you mentioned expectations. And I think that this is something hopefully your listeners will really start to understand, is that expectations equals disappointment. And what I mean by expectations are, we have expectations about who we're supposed to be. We have expectations about who other people are supposed to be. When we get into a relationship, we have expectations about our partner. When we're with family, we have expectations about what they should be. And the thing is you should never have expectations of anybody else, because what you're doing is you're setting yourself up and them for failure, because you have desires, wishes of who they should be or how they should act. And in any relationship, that's not how it should work. In any relationship, and I mean, whether that's a romantic relationship, whether that's a parent-child relationship, whether that's coworkers, friendship, whatever it is, the only thing that you should bring to that relationship is to accept the person for exactly who they are and treat them for exactly who they are. Because if you have expectations, that means you are expecting them to be the way that you want. And that's deadly, because that's trying to control other people. And so you're always going to be disappointed when you have expectations. Now, the difference is you need to have standards. You need to have boundaries about what's acceptable for you. If somebody acts a certain way, then you have a response of like, okay, if they act this way, that's not something that I want in my life, so I will reduce my time with them, or maybe I won't spend time with them. I before I left for Amsterdam, I was dating a gal, and it it was just really easy and relaxed, and it was just such a nice thing. And I asked her one time, I said, so why is it so easy just to be around you when my last relationship was so tumultuous? And and this isn't to blame my ex-partner by any means, but we just reached a point where we both kind of painted ourselves into a corner, and we just knew how to push each other's buttons really bad. And it was just, we couldn't find our way out. But this gal that I was dating told me, she said, the reason why is because I don't expect you to be anything other than exactly who you are. I just have to assume that as long as this relationship lasts, you're going to be the exact same person. And if you change into something that doesn't work for me, that's okay. Then it's my decision of whether or not I want to stay in this or not. I don't expect you to change. I don't expect you to be anything other than who you are. I want you to be the exact person that you are. That's why I'm here.
Mm.
And in my mind, just kind of went, poof. We're like, that was one of the most powerful things somebody had said to me. I'm like, that is so freaking stoic. And as I was thinking through that, I was like, oh, it really just comes down to expectations, And so you, in any kind of relationship, get rid of any expectations because that is poison in a relationship. But you can have standards. You can have standards of the way that you allow other people to treat you. And that's a very different thing. And that, standards could be interchangeable with boundaries. And that is, you can say, these are the things that I want in a relationship. And if it isn't working for me, then it's not for me to tell my partner to change. It's for me to decide, is this acceptable in a relationship or not? And then I need to make a choice about what I'm going to do, not give an ultimatum to my partner. You can communicate that. You can say, hey, this doesn't work for me. And they can decide whether or not they want to do something about it, but they can still do it. They can still do whatever it is that they're doing. But then it's up to you of what choice you're going to make in that relationship. And
Mm.
that removes you trying to control the other person. And so I think that is one of the biggest things, is that we have expectations of wanting to change other people. So one of my coaching clients one time talked about how um, his wife came to him and was like, I noticed that when you're around other people, you kind of act this way. And I think it would be a lot better if you did this. And he looked at it and he was like, okay. And then she was like, well, are you going to change it? And he's like, no, I heard you. I understand. And that may be something that I'll work on in the future. But for now, I'm working on some other things that I think are more important. And I'm okay with that for now. And she was all like, but I gave you the suggestion. You should just change because I'm your wife and all this stuff. And he just looked at her and he's just like, honey, you don't control me. And she stomped off in a huff and she came back a few hours later and she was like, okay, you were right. I just assumed that because I was telling you okay, I'm sorry. He was like, it's okay. He wasn't angry. He was just like, I hear you and I understand what you're saying, but it's not important to me. That thing that you think is so important, that isn't important to me. I've got these other things that I'm working on and they're more important. So that's where I'm putting my energy right now. And it was just, that for me was really telling because he didn't get mad at her about it. He just said, okay, I hear you. But he was very clear. That's not something I want to work on right now. And you could see that that was bruising for her because she was like, oh, I'm telling you how you should change. And he was just like, that's okay. I don't want to change that. And we need to be okay with those things. But we have a really hard time with that, especially when we're really close to somebody. We think we have ownership over them and we can change them into who we think they should be. And we can't. We have to let them become who they want to be and support them in that. And if who they become doesn't work for us anymore, it's okay. Friendships end, relationships end. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. That's a nuanced way to think of that. I've never thought about that. I mean, everything from the expectations of others. And it's weird. We're so hard on ourselves, but the expectations we have for others are always so much greater than they are for ourselves. And it's weird. The people that we're the most cruel to are ourselves, but yet the expectations, like, and we shouldn't set lofty expectations for ourselves too. I mean, there's the saying, if you chase the horizon, no matter how fast you run, you'll never catch it, kind of thing. And the ideal state
I
is
like
never
that.
really what the real state is. And most, it's funny. Rarely when we set expectations for ourselves or the future, normally it's negative, or at least it is for me. Like it's like, oh, I'm not gonna have enough, or this is gonna go wrong, or it's like something new's presented to me, and I think of all the wrong that can happen. But yet, if a friend comes up to you and says, hey, I got this idea, I'm going after this business or this venture or whatever, you think about all the great things that can happen to them, which isn't fair either. So I think it's like a flip side of the coin, but like the whole human psyche there, it's very interesting. Have you ever thought about why that is, that we're hard on ourselves, but probably more celebratory for others, or higher expectations for others?
I think it's because, like you said, we're in our own heads. We know ourselves better than, or don't. I mean, we know ourselves in a way that other people don't. We know our interior lives. We know all the evil, awful, mean things that we think about ourselves and about other people. And we're like, oh man, I have this bad thought. I'm a bad person. And it's like, no, I mean, something upsets you or somebody upset you, and you're like, I want to punch them in the face. I'm like, oh, I'm terrible for thinking that. It's like, no, you just had a thought. If, you would be terrible if you acted on it, but just having the thought doesn't make you a terrible person. And so we judge ourselves really harshly for a number of reasons. Part of that comes from society and comparison. We're always being compared to everybody's best. And we think, oh, we're not like them. We put them up on a pedestal and you compare yourself as like, see, I must be a bad person because I'm not that. But we're seeing them at their absolute best. You go to an award show, you see somebody act in a great movie, you're seeing them at their absolute best. And that's why, when we hear the stories about some actor behind the scenes who's a complete and total asshole, and we're like, but on screen, he's so nice and he's so amazing. It's like, yeah, again, you're seeing the edited version. You're seeing the best version of them. You're not seeing who they really are. But we see ourselves for who we really are. And so that's why I think we're so hard on ourselves, because of that comparison that we have with other people. And like we say, comparison is the thief of joy, because we're always looking like, oh, I'm not as handsome as that person, or I'm not as smart, or I'm not as well spoken. I'm not as successful. But the thing is we don't see them on their down days. I think it was Marilyn Monroe said, if you can't handle me at my worst, you can't have me at my best.
Yeah.
It's like, because she knew that she was a wreck behind the scenes, even though she was this bombshell on the screen. And so everybody thought, oh my God, to be with Marilyn Monroe, she'd be so amazing. But she was also an emotional wreck at the same time. And so we're only seeing the highlight reel. And because
Yeah.
of that, then we're giving an unfair comparison. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Speaking of comparisons too, I often find it weird that when I compare myself to someone or others I hear comparing themselves to others, a lot of times it's something that doesn't even matter to me, like at all. But like in the moment, it's like, oh, well, look at this guy. He's like a great basketball player, but I hate basketball. So like, why would I like say, well, I'm a terrible basketball? Well, of course I'm a terrible basketball player, and I'm okay with that. It's really weird though. Like I found like sometimes, I mean, sometimes like in the podcast space, you'll compare yourself to, I mean, let's just throw it out, Joe Rogan. I mean, top of the charts, whatever. But I'm not Joe Rogan, and I don't really want to do what he's doing, and I honor him for what he's done. Tim Ferriss, you name any of them. I don't want to pick on just one, but these monsters of podcasting, there's really no comparison because at some point they were like you shooting your first 100 episodes, me currently shooting my first 100 episodes. So there's no way I could be like them. But like if I want to be a podcaster, it's okay to watch them and see what they're doing. But comparison, like you said,
Mhm.
is the thief of all joy because if I look at my downloads compared to Joe Rogan's, well, if anyone looks at their downloads compared to Joe Rogan's, they're going to be disappointed. But that's not the
Yeah.
point of this, right? The point of it is like learn what he does. Don't become him, obviously, because you never will be, or mimic him to that degree. But I do think people can, if they're gonna compare at all, compare apples to apples, and in
Yeah.
progress, not in value, not in anything. Learn from people, but oftentimes I find like my biggest comparison is like you say an actor, you see a guy on this and you're like, oh man, I wish I was like this guy or this guy or this guy. Well, like, no, do I want to put in all the hours that that guy probably had to spend alone memorizing his lines and all the drama school and all these kind of things? I think a lot of times the work that we admire from someone is the beauty of the work. And maybe if we could stop comparison and just witness the greatness that's in front of us at that time, because the actor on the screen, Joe Rogan, they have no impact on my life. I know that's a long-winded kind of thing, but I just find comparisons so weird because it's like something we all do. And again, I think it's just society because it's all around us, especially now more than when you and I were kids. I think we're probably contemporaries in age. We didn't have this social media or whatever. So like when you saw like Michael Jordan, you might see him on like the one or two games a week that were that week. You didn't see it every single day like you can now with these, stars and athletes in front of us. So any additional thoughts on comparisons?
I think that, again, this comes back to that. that self-acceptance. If you can just accept yourself for exactly who you are, and you are so comfortable in your own skin, you can be joyful about the artistry that you see from other people rather than being jealous or, envying them for what they have or how they can be. You're able to just look at it and appreciate, wow, that's great, because you know exactly who you are. You know what you're good at. And usually we want to compare ourselves in a lot of ways because we feel inferior. And we're like, oh, like, I don't know if you run into people who tear other people down to try and make themselves feel better. It's because they're so insecure. So if you are totally comfortable with who you are and you know what you're skilled at and what you're not, I mean, for example, I'm a good singer. So I actually was a musical theater major when I started college. That's why my voice sounds the way that it does, because I spent years singing through high school and college and I had a really good singing coach. So when I first started singing when I was like 15, 16, I started off learning technique correctly from the beginning. And so I just learned how to sing well. And so I have a good voice, I have a good Broadway opera style voice. And so I know when I go to karaoke, I'm probably going to nail it. And I'm comfortable with that. And but when it comes to guitar, I'm a decent guitar player. I can strum a few tunes and do some things. But like I watched somebody, like I don't know if you can see there's a little poster on my back, a guy named Jesse Cook. He's this flamenco guitar player. And he's phenomenal. There's no way I could even compare to him. So I don't go, oh man, I wish I were Jesse Cook. That really sucks. I'm just like, man, he's amazing. I would love to be able to play like that, but I know I'll never get to that. I just don't have that dexterity in my fingers. And that's totally okay. If I'm so worried about trying to pump myself up, I'm missing the beauty of that art of that other person.
Yeah.
And so when you're just comfortable with who you are, and then you can be humble about it. Like I can say, I'm a good singer. Am I Pavarotti? Am I Placido Domingo? Am I, somebody who's going to be on Broadway? No, but if I know that I had the raw talent, that if I had trained for that, I could have made strides and done that, but that was not a path that I pursued. But I can be clear-eyed about what my actual skill level is. It's not delusional. I know that I can sing that well, because when I sing for people, they're like, "Wow, you really can sing," and I'm like, "Yeah, I can." But give me a guitar, yeah, I'm a hack, and that's okay. But I can honestly evaluate myself that way because there's not my ego involved in it. I don't need to be the best singer. I don't need to be a great guitar player, but I like singing. And so I sing and I have a pretty good talent for it. I like playing guitar sometimes. I'm a better piano player, but I'm suck at reading music. So I play everything by ear. And so I know what I'm good at and what I'm not. And when you accept yourself, then you can actually just look at things very clear eyed. You can look at where you are, and that stops a lot of that comparison in a negative sort of way. You can do it to compare somebody like, wow, like go back to the Jesse Cook thing. You know what? Actually, I really do want to be a good flamenco player. So let me study Jesse Cook because he's doing it right. And that's what I want to be. And that kind of comparison, where you look at somebody as a role model, that can be incredibly healthy because it shows you what's possible. And so I
Yeah.
think that that should be that healthy respect of like, that's where I want to get to, because I think that that's a lot of what I want to be. That's the type of thing that I want to have in my life. So I'm going to study what this person did so that I can hopefully get to their level or get closer to their level. But I'm not going to be mad that they're at that level and I'm not. I mean, that's just stupid.
Yeah, it's just weird. I love your example about the singing, and I'll tell you, I too nail it at karaoke, but from a different perspective than you, because I know I don't sing well, but I enjoy it. And how do I know I don't sing well? Well, I was a tuba major. That's where I went to school for. So musical, and we had to take solfege. And I had this French teacher where it all started, and she was from the old school of solfege. And my final with her, she said, "I'm gonna pass you under one condition. You never sing in public again." And I said, in public, does that mean the shower too? And she's like, yeah, don't even sing in the shower. So like I have an expert in the field of vocal performance that I'm not, but you know what? I enjoy it so much. So I know I nail it, even though it might be uncomfortable. So may not want to go to a karaoke club with me or whatever, but no, it really, but just because I'm musical on the tuba doesn't mean that I can sing. That doesn't mean I can play the guitar. I one day want to learn the banjo. And when I picked the banjo up, absolutely terrible at it. The younger version of myself would have been like, oh, I'm terrible. I should just stop. There's no value. Now I see it as like a challenge because it's something I want to do, which is very important too. Like if you say you want to do something, go out there and do it. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that your partner said, "Hey, if you do this, do it 100 times because you're jumping from things to things." I'm that same person. My best friend always calls me, says, "What are you doing these days? Like, what are you into?" Because over the years, I've tried a whole bunch of things because I'm curious about a lot of things, and I love steep learning curves. And, again, if I guess in a lot of ways, I never compare myself to anyone in those regards. But then in my professional career or the things that bring in money, or like you said earlier, my reputation, these were all things that I always worried about before. Now, I still want to be a good man, right? And I think it was Aurelius said, stop thinking about being a good man and be one. Well, I think in order to be a good man, you just have to be, right? And taking away all these comparisons and these like negative thoughts you've got in your head and all these things trying to control other people, all the things we talked about now is the only thing that allows me to go be a good man. And being a good man, be a good leader, be a good self leader. It all comes down. It's like a triangle effect. But I think the foundation of both Stoicism and self leadership theory, even though I don't think there's any literature out there that compares the two, but that's essentially exactly what it is, because all those Stoics were they had jobs. They were interacting with the people. So they didn't have to go become like a monk out in the woods or, somewhere secluded. That's the beauty of, I think, Stoicism is it allows you to get this like presence about you, but still be out and about with others and deal with day-to-day situations. Any kind of thoughts on that you'd like to share, or new topic?
No, I mean, I think that no, I think that that's absolutely right. I mean, Stoicism is about how to be a good person in the world. And in the world means in with people. I mean, they have the idea of cosmopolitanism, that we are all part of a human family, part of the cosmos. And so you treat everybody well. You treat everybody with fairness. Even if they treat you poorly, you don't treat them badly because they treat you badly. You treat them the way that you want to treat them.
Mm,
Somebody says something mean about you, sure, you would be justified in saying something mean about them, or, wanting to get revenge or whatever it is. But is that the kind of person you want to be? If it is, fine, be that person, but it's not going to make you very happy. But it's about being the person you want to be, regardless of what anybody else does, regardless of external circumstances. And that's where that real strength comes in, and you become as Marcus Aurelius said, you become a promontory that the waves crash against, unmoving. And you are so solid in who you are and your principles and your values. Not that you're pig-headed or that you're like, I'm right. It's that everything you do is based off of those four principles of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And as long as you are making what you think is the most moral decision and the most ethical decision, do it. And make sure that you don't waver on that. And that's what they really talk about, is this kind of, I know it sounds absolutist, but it's not. It's that you're doing what you think is the most right decision, with the idea that if you are wrong, and Marcus Aurelius even says that, if anybody can show me where I'm wrong, I gladly accept that and be willing to change, because no one was hurt by being shown the truth. They were only hurt by remaining in error. So it's not that you're unflagging, unfailingly, stick to it. It's that you do it because it's the right thing until you get more information. And when you realize it's the wrong thing, you change it as fast as possible. And so, yeah. And so, but once you can do that, then you never feel bad about the decisions you make, because they were always done from a place of what you thought was the absolute best thing to do. And when you do that for yourself, you can assume that other people are doing that as well, because most people are
mm,
trying to do what they think is the right thing. And so you're much more forgiving for them. So I want to point something out, and you probably had this experience. When I became more accepting of myself and I was kinder to myself, I was more compassionate to myself, I was less judgmental about myself, and all of those things then were the way that I treated other people. I was less
yep.
judgmental about them. I was much more compassionate. I was much kinder, because I wasn't so hard on myself. I could be much kinder to everybody else because I didn't feel like I was being beaten up. And so I didn't beat up on others. And it was this interesting thing that because I was kind and loving to myself, I'm much more kind and loving to everybody else around me.
Yeah, no, and it parallels with the golden rule: treat others as you treat yourself, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Well, once you get over that part where treat as yourself, well, if you're treating yourself terribly and you're negative and you're judging and all that, you can't treat other ones. Now, socially, it's unacceptable. So a lot of times you would treat them how society would want them to be treated, or again, how you expected them to be treated. But then it would just wear on your soul even more. And it's funny that opened up for me gratitude of others. Again, it's a word that we throw around in the coaching community all across. I mean, you can go anywhere and see gratitude, every this, that, but really appreciative of when someone gives their time, talent, treasure, whatever it is they give to you. It just opened up my whole world because I now saw myself as like maybe deserving of it, or at
Hmm.
least accepting that they weren't coming here to change me. Maybe they're just giving you information. Because I don't know about you too. When I was in my deepest, darkest period, constructive criticism wasn't a thing. It was just criticism. It could have been
Yes.
going back to the guitar lesson. Someone could say, "Hey, Eric, man, maybe try this like fingering or this kind of way to hold it or something." You'd be like, "Oh, this guy's just tearing me down. He thinks I'm." No, the person's trying to help you, give you information, knowledge that can help you go get along. But before, I wasn't able to see that. So all gratitude was forced
Mm.
too. So the way I treated others, the way I interacted, and the way I received and was thankful was all like forced. And all that just opened up the world. And, again, it was a lot of years of walking in one way. So it's not overnight. I tell my listeners this all the time: change takes time. It's not a light switch. It's more like a dimmer, like those old school ones that they used to have where you rotate them around a little bit. And and like you said, I love what you said earlier. If new information comes to you or new wisdom comes to you, change it as fast as possible. But that doesn't mean change it right now. I mean, if you can,
Yeah.
by all means. But some things you've got to do, you've got to change over time. If you got to get out of a bad relationship, or you've got to change your friend group, and that's one of the things too I've noticed is like I now seek out people that kind of feed this kind of stoic mindset. I don't want to be around people that are worrying about trouble or borrowing trouble from other things. Not to say I'm not there for them, because I'm way more empathetic to them, but at the same time, it drains your energy. And it's like you said, baby stoic. I got to guard it while I'm building it, right? I don't have the calluses and all that out there now. But no, I completely agree with you on that. But well, Eric,
Yeah. And
go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, and when you, like I said, when you get to that place of that self-acceptance, then you are just so comfortable with yourself and you know yourself, so that when people give you criticism or information, you're easily able to take it as information because you're comfortable with who you are. So if somebody says, "Hey, you're doing this," you can go, "Am I doing that?" Simple example: if you do that exercise and you write down all the things you don't like about yourself, maybe you put down, "I don't like that I'm selfish sometimes," because you know that you can be selfish about things. Well, what that does is that opens it up. So you go, next time somebody calls you out for being selfish, you go, "Well, I know that I have a tendency to be selfish. Am I being selfish right now?" You can actually approach it from a place of objectivity, and you can look at it and go, "Well, I can be selfish sometimes. So let me think about it. Maybe, and maybe you are, or maybe you're not, but you can look at it objectively without any type of judgments." And that's one thing people kind of get confused, is they think objectivity is cold and hard and cruel. Objectivity is just taking away a judgment about it. It's just listing the facts. It's just looking at something clear-eyed. And to me, that's actually very compassionate. If your friend comes to you and they're telling you about their problem and you're not judging them for it, you're just listening for the information, that's compassionate. But if you're judging them and you're having opinions, you're not being objective, And so objectivity is not cruel and it's not cold. It's just removing judgment from a situation so you can look at it clear eyed, whether that's other people, whether that's a situation you're in, whether that's towards yourself. So I think that that's really important. And when you've gotten to that point where you like yourself and you're comfortable with in your own skin, when people come up and tell you something, you can be like, "Oh, okay, maybe that's true. I need to think about that." And it's so much easier, and you don't get emotionally reactive because you know yourself, you like yourself. And if you did do that, okay, well, I don't want to be that way. So I should take this information in, because if I was acting that way, I need this information so I can change that. And so it
Mm.
changes the whole dynamic on that. And that's why it's so important for me, it was so important to kind of get to that place where I'm just comfortable in my own skin. I like who I am. And it
I,
took a long time to like who I was and be a friend to myself.
no, another thing I'll add to objectivity, and you said it yourself, like if someone tells you you're selfish or you write down and you do this exercise and you write down that you're selfish, most of us say we're selfish all the time. Like, do you find yourself doing that? Like, whenever you find a flaw in yourself, like, I'm always this or I'm always that. Well, you're
Yeah.
not always
Maximalizing.
selfish. Right, right. So if you get that perspective in there and you say, "Am I being selfish right now?" is far different than saying, "I'm always selfish" or "I'm a, you know, terrible person because I'm selfish." And that change in the thought patterns in your head alone is so freeing because again, it's just at the moment. One of the things that I like, and we'll probably close it out with this one, but and to hear your thoughts on it, but the Stoics say every day you die to your old self, so you can start every day. And I even take it so for further to the next minute. I can change where I'm at, because what the past is not what the present is, and it's not how I am. So what I was yesterday, I can change that today. I can change it tomorrow, and I found that like super freeing to me because I thought whatever my past was my identity and was my future. And really, it was nothing. In the grand scheme of things, it was nothing. It just got me to where I am today. So I'm grateful for it because the mistakes I made, like you said earlier, it's not that you were doing anything wrong. It was just you were doing the best you could at the time. Well, but that's not who I want to be anymore. And I certainly didn't want to be a depressed, anxious person all the time. I wanted to live a life fully. Well, that started the day I said, "Hey, I'm good." For me, it started about a year ago when I told my wife I'm not getting off of a chair until I begin to give myself permission to like myself again. And I didn't know about Stoicism then. I wish I had. It would have made it maybe a little quicker to get there. But thinking about that, that was a Stoic decision. I'm going to stand up.
Hmm.
And from this moment forward, I'm not going to say I didn't say I would like myself. I'm giving myself permission to like myself. So could you expound a
Hmm.
little bit about that, about dying daily to yourself and rebirth and all that Stoics talk about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, both Marcus Aurelius and Seneca talk about that. Seneca said, treat each day as if it's the end of a life. And Marcus Aurelius said, consider that you have died and that everything going forward is a new life. And what it is it's just letting go of the past, which is something that you can't control. It's just very, very clear eyed. Like you can't control this. So let it go. And the future, again, not something that you can control. So you let that go. Because I used to spend a lot of time in the future. Like I was always thinking about, oh, when I get this, then I'll be happy. When I get this, because I wasn't happy. And so I was like, I'm going to get to a place where I'm happy and it's going to be in the future. And so it was like, but once I kind of fell into Stoicism, started working on these things, I found that I spend more time in the present because I like what I'm doing. I like who I am. I like my life, even though things are hard and you know, there are plenty of things that I struggle with. I still, like a couple of weeks ago, I had kind of a crash and burnout session because I was just doing too much. My mom had spinal surgery. I was driving back and forth from the hospital every day and just reached a point where I was just exhausted and just and so I had a couple of days where I was down and a friend of mine called me up and it's like, hey, let's talk and let me help you reframe things. And, he's also a Stoic who met through my podcast and we've just been really great friends. He lives here in Oregon. And, it with that 2 hour talk, it like reminded me of all the things I knew. And he even said that. He's like, everything I'm teaching you is stuff I learned from your podcast. It was like, okay. And I said, yeah, I'm stuck in this loop. And he just helped me break out of that loop. And by the end of the day, I went and had dinner with my daughter, had a great time, and they're doing well. And it was just totally shifted things around.
Mm.
And then yesterday I got hit with another big project I was working on, and I got kicked off of it. I'm like, and for about an hour, I was kind of in a pissy mood. And I was like, okay, I'm going to let myself sit in this mood. And I sent him the text, letting him know what's going on, my buddy again. And so he gave me a quick call. We talked for about 20 minutes. And he's like, you know what to do? And I said, yeah. And he's like, but I just thought you needed a cheerleading session right now. And I'm like, I really appreciate that. By the end, another hour or two, I was just fine. So it's not that Stoicism makes your life perfect. It makes it so that when you get kicked in the nuts, you get knocked to the ground, that you can get back up a lot quicker. And that's the thing, is that, you're still going to take hits. You're still going to get, life is not going to go perfect for you. But rather than sitting and wallowing in it for days, you can get up and actually do something about it. Now, one of the things you said that I wanted to circle back on, where you said you gave yourself permission to like yourself. That's why in that exercise that have people do, I'm like, these are just things you have to accept about yourself. You don't have to like it. You don't have to love them. You just have to accept them. Because when somebody says, hey, just love yourself, if you don't believe that you're worth loving, that is one of the hardest things to do. So I say, I believe you are worth accepting. Then you can work up to like, then you can work up to love. But start with just accepting yourself, because you can accept that you do these stupid things. You don't have to like them. You don't have to love them. But you can accept that you do these things. And people go, yeah. Okay, I can accept that. And that right there is the first insight into self-knowledge. And it gives you permission that it's okay to be this way. So really what you're saying is, I accept this and I'm okay this way. I'm not perfect. I'm not great. I'm not fantastic. I don't love it. I don't like it, but I'm okay with it. And that sets that foundation. That sets that level that you're able to pick up. And that's what you did when you said, I give myself permission to like myself. Boom. You gave yourself permission to say that I'm okay with who I am and I'm going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great perspective. And, it's even your friend too. It's like sometimes the counsel of others tells you things that but you're too scared to tell yourself. It's like the doctors are the worst patients kind of thing. But no, it is a journey, but you've lived it. I've lived it. And I'm becoming more stoic. You said you referred to this guy as a stoic. I don't know when I will refer to myself as a stoic. Right now, I'm a student of Stoicism to try to live a better life.
For me, my definition is, if you're trying to live the principles, you're a stoic.
Yeah.
If you're failing, you're still a stoic. There's no litmus test. There's no ritual. There's no thing where somebody, puts a,
no degree you can put on your
sign, give you the secret handshake or whatever it is.
Your name, comma, stoic. Yeah.
It's really just about. For me, I just choose that term because it's part of my identity, and I've chosen that as part of my identity. That it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means that I ascribe to a certain set of principles, and that everything I do, I try to run through those principles so that I do the best that I can. And I'm going to fail at it plenty of times, and that's okay. And that was the one thing, kind of side tangent here. That was one thing I didn't like about being Mormon, was that they had these unrealistic expectations of how you were supposed to be as a person. And anytime you fell short of those, you felt like a piece of shit. You felt guilty. You felt lots of shame. And there was lots of shame and guilt wrapped up in that. And it was really too bad, because if you look at just pure Christianity, it's a great set of teachings. But how it's been perverted into other things with all of these rituals and these rules and this dogma that things have to fit in this, I think has taken what was once a really good thing and turned it into something that is almost unrecognizable today. And so for me, Stoicism is going back to those core things. And because it's just all principles and there's no dogma, there's no, like I said, there's no like secret society that goes, you are one of us now, you're just, here's some really core principles. And if you're living them in your life, then you can call yourself a Stoic.
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes back to the expectations too. I mean, when you talk about church and standards and stuff, there's an expectations that are normally so lofty no one can ever meet. But you do look at the true biblical text, and as I mentioned, I told you I'm kind of a student of both. And even the greatest people in the Bible all failed, and they failed repeatedly, time after time after time. And God still used them in the stories and in the witness or whatever that it was promoted. And that's the cool thing. And I think that's a great summary of Stoicism, is like, you do the best you can today, take stock of it, be aware of it, and then change what you can, as you said, as quickly as possible, which I like. But the key is quick, it's as quickly as possible because some things do take a while. Look, you've been studying it for years. You told us about two instances in the last month and a half that you went through. And those little setbacks, I just want to encourage anyone who wants to try stoicism or try changing their own, mental space. Don't let them, they're just a moment in time. You can do better next time or change the way you approach something next time. That's the beauty of learning new things and new philosophies, especially. You got to play with it a little bit and don't be too rigid. Like you said, the word dogma. I ignore or run away from as much dogma as I can. If someone says you have to or you must or whatever, no, that's their opinion and that's what worked for them, but what worked for them may not work for you. What worked for you may not get you to where you want to go. I know that's a famous quote as well, but Erick, I could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately I don't have hours. But thank you for enlightening us on a primer to Stoic. But as you mentioned earlier, you've got the Stoic 101. Is that available? Yeah, I know you said Five Below. I think we have some of those here on the East Coast. I've never been in one either, but it's on Amazon and places like that for
Yeah.
people. But why don't you just tell everyone where they can get you instead of me just babbling through it?
Okay. So my website is stoic.coffee. So it's pretty easy to find. The name of the podcast is the Stoic Coffee Break. I guess some other things coming up. I have a course on mental toughness called Build an Unbreakable Mind. And that's basically taking all of these tools and that I've learned over the last 10 years and putting them into a workable program. So rather than just learning a principle and, listening to a podcast or reading a book and hoping that you might be able to implement these, it's an actual program which helps you to implement them in your daily life. Plus, my favorite part of it is I have what's called a personal codex, which is basically worksheets that really ask you probing deep questions where you go really, really deep on these things. Because until you get to the root of a lot of these things, it's really hard to change them. If you're just changing your habits, oftentimes that's just surface level. But we go really, really deep in uncovering a lot of the things that are behind why you do the things you do and ways that you can reshape your whole thinking. And then we have daily exercises, there's video lessons from me, and then we meet every week and we discuss what we've gone over. So I've had some really great feedback from that. This will be the third time that I've run this cohort, so I'm really excited about that. But so those are kind of the main things I'm working on. Also, if people want personal coaching or professional coaching, that is something I also do. And you can find out more about that on my website as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your story and your insights. And we'll definitely direct people to your website or so they can find out more. But I do encourage all the listeners, if you haven't explored Stoicism, just check it out. See if it's for you. A lot of really cool things and just reading the writings of people 2,000 years ago is really cool because most of it is understandable. And I just wish every listener the best and use Stoicism, use whatever it is to lead yourself and show up better for others. As both Erick and I said, once you get in tune with yourself, you will be able to show up for others better. So thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time.